What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. This is Leo's Nerd Talk, and today we're going to be going over weapons. So let's get into that. My name is Leo, and if it's like time with movie, TV show, video game related, or just anything nerdy, you are in the right place. And like I said, today we are talking about weapons. Without further ado, let's get into the review. Now, I came into this movie knowing almost nothing about this film, not the premise, not the concept. I only knew that it was the director from Barbarian. A lot of people were liking it, and that's about it. I came in completely blind, never watched the trailer, and I think that is the best way to kind of come into this film. But let's go ahead and go over my thoughts about this movie. But before I go over my pros and cons about weapons, also let me know what you guys thought about the movie in the comment section down below. How do you guys enjoy this film? Do you guys like it more than Barbarian, less than Barbarian? Love to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comment section below. But starting out with my pros, I gotta say I do very much enjoy the concept of this movie. What a great, creepy kind of idea of having these kids from this random classroom all at the same time at 2:17 in the morning, I should say, was leaving their house, ran off into the darkness, and never came back. And just really unpeeling those mysteries. Like, that is such a weird and wacky idea, so strange. It's just a creepy imagery of all the kids just getting up in the middle of the night and leaving their house, running into the darkness in the middle of the night or super early in the morning. That is very, very just enticing and impelling to kind of just start your movie off. That is the opening scene of this movie, just seeing these kids run off into the distance. And that is a very gripping kind of idea, and how the movie just slowly peels back these different layers of kind of unfolding what is really happening. And I like the way they do it too, where it's not your traditional just act 1, act 2, act 3. This is a lot more chapter based, where we're following specific characters from the beginning to the part where they all kind of mesh together by the end of it. So I like when movies kind of do stuff like that, where they break it up into chapters where we're following Justine, and when we get to a certain portion of the movie where it just, you're like, holy shit, like, this is crazy, like, what's gonna happen next? And then it cuts to black, and now we're following a different character, and again something crazy happens, and you're just like, okay, how is this gonna tie into Justine's story? And then it cuts to black, and now we're following a different character, and you get that a couple of times throughout the movie, and it's very, very refreshing. And especially because you just have that cliffhanger every single time at the end of that chapter, just wondering, how is this all going to connect? Why are all these people involved, or how are they involved at all with these kids or in this story, or what is going on as a whole? And it's very fun to see these characters through their perspective of what they witnessed, what they saw, their thought process, how they're emotionally handling the situation, whether it be someone being extremely angry, or someone being very methodical of how they're trying to figure out what happened to their kid, or someone just trying to live their life and not be the kind of the scapegoat for what happened to all these kids. And so it is very fun, very episodic, very chapter based, and just seeing all these different characters and ideas and storylines and perspectives all kind of weave together by the end of it. It makes it for a very satisfying conclusion when you see it all kind of pay off and just have this very, really wacky conclusion. And I think everybody here did an amazing job, super fantastic job. There's a couple of characters that I don't really care too much about, that I really don't think we should have focused on really at all, which we'll get into a little bit later. But even those characters that I don't think their story was really that important to the overall plot, they still did an amazing job. I still enjoyed the character overall. I still think they acted very well, and you can see all the different people's emotions and their stresses and how they're just reacting to the situation. And I think everybody conveyed their emotions very well on screen, just through their actions or through their body language, their speech, speech pattern and things like that. So, or just kind of like things that they do where under stress, they do things they shouldn't do. So again, you start to invest yourself in these characters, because they do have a very layered, characteristic to them, and they all kind of have a character growth from beginning to end. Whether it's really a growth or a decline, they all have at least a character arc where we kind of follow throughout this entire movie. And everybody, in my opinion, I feel like they come out as a new person by the end of the film. I think the horror elements of this movie were done very well. There's very rarely any jump scares throughout this entire film. I think there's maybe 2 or 3 jump scares that are effective, not necessarily earned in my opinion, but they're effective overall. It gets you a little like, oh, startled, not necessarily scary per se, but I think the scary part is just like the very weird things that these people start doing. Like probably one of the creepiest scenes is you have a character that is staking out this house, trying to figure out if there's something going on with this house. And in the middle of the night, you see the door open and it's pitch black in there. You can't see anybody. And you just see this person kind of just slowly walk out with like a pair of scissors in their hand and walk up to the car. And you have this moment where everybody in the car, or excuse me, not the car, in the theater, is kind of laughing because it's a little silly. You see this person kind of just waddling, like there's their first time walking. And everybody in the theater was kind of laughing, cracking up, nervously laughing, or actually just thinking it's funny. And then you get that ooh moment when you just hear the car door open and the person gets into the car while the person that was staking out this place falls asleep. And you have that very tense moment where you're like, what is she going to do with those pair of scissors? And it's a very, very tense moment where you're just like, oh my goodness. Or you have characters with like some forks, they start stabbing their faces, and that, people know what a fork stab feels like. If you've ever hit yourself with a fork by accident, I don't know how that would happen, but it hurts. And to see someone just jamming it into their face, it's one of those like moments where you're just like, oh God, no, stop. So it's very, very good in that way where you have those really good elements where it's not supposed to be like this most creepy thing ever or the most gory thing ever or have like the scariest faces or monsters or demons. It's none of that. It's just the very kind of grounded element of it where it's just off enough where it's unsettling. And that's where I think this movie kind of excels on the horror aspect of it. Is it the scariest movie out there, or what people kind of hyped it up to be? Not really. It's not that scary of a film. I think actually like a good 80% of the movie is outside of the horror element. It's more of like a mystery type of figuring out what it's trying to do, very similar to like a movie like Prisoners, where Prisoners can be considered a horror movie really, but mostly it's kind of like a mystery thriller. And that's kind of where I think most of this movie kind of falls into that category, where it's kind of more like a mystery thriller, not necessarily a horror film. You just have horror elements sprinkled kind of across the entire movie. And on the flip side, kind of already talked about it, but this movie was surprisingly pretty funny. There was a lot of moments where the entire theater was laughing out loud, cracking up, including myself, because there were moments where I think these comedy moments were very much earned, never took you out of the overall central plot point of these missing kids and never felt out of place. It was very meticulous and very well placed comedy. And I think that is just a testament to the directing, the writing, where this comedy doesn't make you feel like, or doesn't take you out of it where you're like, oh, okay, here we go. It's very, you laugh and then it brings you right back into these very kind of edge of your seat moments. And I think that's just a fantastic film writing, fantastic directing, fantastic acting as well, because you have to act these parts well for them to be funny, but also again just off enough where it's a little unsettling at the same time. So very, very good comedy sprinkled out the entire movie. I think that was probably one of the most surprising things for me in this film. And I don't know where to put this as a con or a pro, but I'm just going to throw it in here. I do think this movie very much feels like Long Legs in a sense. It has a very similar kind of plot when it comes to Long Legs. You have a character that reminds me, at least personally, a lot like Long Legs himself, Nicolas Cage's character in that movie. And so you have very similar plots and themes and imagery, witchcrafty stuff, demonic stuff, whatever you want to call it. So very similar to that. And Long Legs, I personally think, is a great movie. So that's where I'm not sure if I should consider it like a pro or a con, because I do think Long Legs does it a little bit better. But it's still a compliment that it reminds me of Long Legs, and I still very much enjoy Weapons as well. And I do like the mystery element of this movie too. I think it keeps you at arm's distance enough where you don't really ever really get to realize what's happening until it starts to reveal it to you. And especially because we don't really get to see the person that's behind it or the thing that's behind it or whatever you want to call it until kind of later on in the movie. So you are really left in much of a mystery as everybody else in this town, where you have no idea what's going on, and you're slowly just peeling back the layers, and you start to kind of realize throughout the movie that there's probably some sort of sinister stuff at nature here, whether it's just something that randomly happened that's kind of demonic, or someone's in control of it. You obviously realize that from the beginning. So, but again, you don't really ever realize the full nature of it. That's something that I think they kept that mystery very well. I do wish they left a little bit more breadcrumbs towards the beginning of the film, unless I completely missed it. You guys can let me know. But I do think the mystery element of this movie was executed very well. And someone mentioned this to me on one of my out of theater reactions of this movie, and I wasn't even going to plan on mentioning something like this, but I do think it's a good point, and it's something that I 100% agree with, is just having this movie kind of feel like a kind of like a statement of society or our country, in a sense of where we have a very traumatic kind of event happen, where again, like something like this, 17 kids go missing one night out of nowhere, and how we all tend to react to it, how we all want to find that scapegoat and blame someone in particular, even though we don't have any clear evidence that someone's at fault. We still want to blame a certain person to make ourselves feel better about it, that we weren't the ones that caused this to happen. It had to be that person. It had to be that person to make us feel better. And I think that is a great point that person made out to me. And it's something that I definitely thought about and very much agree with 100%, that you can get that theme out of this movie, of just the society just really blaming someone or trying to escape it by any means necessary, whether you drown yourself in work, or you hyper focus on the situation, or you just play the blame game again. It's something that it could be interpreted while watching the movie. But overall, I had a very, very fun time with it. A very wacky movie, very creepy imagery, a very good concept, some great humor in there, some actually decent like body horror or like gore in this as well. That was very surprising, to the point where it came off as kind of funny as well, how intense the gore was at certain moments. So again, just a very, very fun movie. Highly recommend watching it in theaters. One of the better horror movies. Again, we're having a great year for horror for sure. And I'm very excited to see what this director does next in future projects. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the cons. And starting on my cons is something that's not necessarily the movie itself, or I guess you can say it's part of the movie as well, because there are some things that happen, but is the title itself. I don't really like the title of the movie. I don't think it kind of fits with this. And I feel like they tried to justify it in the movie. And, I'm not sure if this is considered spoilers or not. If it is, spoiler warning here. But if not, you want to skip ahead like 15-20 seconds, go ahead, do so now. But there's a dream sequence with one of the fathers, and there's a moment where he kind of dreams that he's in front of his house, and on top of the house there's just like a giant AR assault rifle, like just floating in the middle of the air. I don't know, like I guess that's why it's called Weapons, but that never gets explained. We never circle back to that. We never fully realize what that really means. And I guess we can also think about your subconscious trying to figure out what is going on. And that is what his subconscious kind of did in this dream sequence, is imagine this giant AR over his house. I guess you can kind of interpret it that way. But, later on, he even says to one of the main characters that the kids or the people are being weaponized with whatever witchcraft or demonic stuff is going on here. And again, I guess you can say that's why it's called Weapons. I just do think there could have been a better title, and they try to force the name of the title into the movie, where you're kind of just they're just like, that's kind of weird. That was very weird, some weird imagery to kind of just throw in there out of nowhere. And again, I'm trying to stay as spoiler free as possible. But once we get kind of towards the ends and start peeling back the reveals and things like that, or what is going on here, I do wish we got a little bit more detail of why this is happening, why this is being done, why this person can do this, or this thing can do this, or whatever you want to call it again. I do wish we got a little bit more. We figure out the how, but we never figure out the why. And I wish we got the why, and you know, it just felt a little disappointing in terms of details. And I can always appreciate when a movie kind of leaves you in the dark, because sometimes that could work. And there's been movies that have proven that it works when you're kind of just left in the dark and don't really fully peel back all the layers and don't really ever figure out what exactly happened. But I do think this movie would have served, for me at least, better if we got a little bit more details on the why of why this movie is happening to begin with. And I do think there were two characters and two chapters that we follow that I don't really think is absolutely necessary. We have the cop character who is kind of having like an affair with the main character Justine, and this kind of like drug addict junkie that he arrests, and there we follow them for 2 chapters, and I don't really think they serve a purpose. And I guess you can kind of argue that they help these other characters figure out where to go, but I do think they proven enough throughout the whole movie that they would have figured it out on their own and figured out where to go. So I felt like they didn't really serve a full purpose here. While fun characters to follow, I think they had some funny moments, some intense moments, some like ooh moments. At the end of the day, they could have been completely cut out of the movie, and I think the movie would have been exactly the same and would have been serviceable enough without those 2 characters and without those 2 chapters even at all in the film. But overall, I still had a great time with this movie. Is it the scariest movie? Is it the best, philosophical, quote unquote, elevated horror movie that we've gotten? No, not really. I don't think the hype really lived up to it, in my opinion, but it still was a great horror film and still makes me excited to see what this director is going to do next. It still makes me excited for how good horror has been for the last couple of years. But again, if you guys like time thing movie, TV show, video game related, or just anything nerdy, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. I'll see you guys on the next video. Thank you.